Welcome, everyone. Let's jump right in. When you hear the word Pope, you might instantly think of a long, unbroken chain from Peter to our modern-day leader. However, the early history, it's like a whole different ball game.
Yeah, totally. It's almost as if the term Pope started off as just a respectful title, right?
Right, exactly. It's like originally from the Greek word papas, which meant father. And back in the earliest days, it wasn't exclusive. Bishops and even priests from different parts of the Christian world were, called Pope as a kind of honor.
Mm-hmm. So this title wasn't just reserved for what became the Bishop of Rome?
Yep. In fact, in early Christianity, the Bishop of Alexandria was using it long before it was monopolized by Rome, which is fascinating.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, when we look at the Roman Church in the 1st and early 2nd centuries, things get even murkier. Rather than one centralized figure, the community was, like, all over the place, fragmented across many house churches with their own elders.
So, instead of this unified church with one boss, they had multiple groups with different leaders and even different theological leanings?
Right. It's like there wasn't a single supreme leader, but rather many respected elders. Names like Linus, Cletus, and Clement appear later, but back then they were, just one of many voices rather than the sole authority. And here's the kicker. Around the late 2nd century, Rome was feeling the pressure. There were internal divisions, rival teachings, and of course external persecution. So there was this clear, desperate need for stability.
Right. And that's when figures like Irenaeus of Lyons stepped in, isn't it?
Exactly. Irenaeus, around 180 CE, produced that list of bishops going all the way back to Peter, but scholars argue it was, more of a constructed narrative rather than an actual history.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was essentially like a retroactive invention, a way to impose order on the chaos. It legitimized Rome as the guardian of apostolic faith by, creating this unbroken chain from Peter, even though there's little evidence for such continuity in the early centuries.
So, in essence, for nearly 100 years after Peter's death, Rome didn't actually have what we'd call a pope in the modern sense?
Precisely. The early Roman leader, if one existed, was just one respected elder among several. Not a monarchical bishop ruling over all Christians, but rather a local leader with limited influence. Oh, and this is key, maybe even with competing ideas within the city.
That, really throws a wrench into the traditional narrative, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It challenges the whole notion of papal infallibility and the idea of apostolic succession that the Catholic Church leans on. If the story of Peter handing down authority is, well, more myth than history, then a lot of our assumptions about universal, supreme
that's a game
papal
changer.
authority are built on shaky grounds. And get this, the story even takes a wild turn with Valentinus. You remember him? A brilliant Gnostic teacher in the mid-2nd century who, according to some accounts, nearly became the Bishop of Rome. Imagine that outcome.
Wow, seriously? So, if the vote had swung differently, Rome might have been led by a Gnostic? That would have definitely, upended everything we know about Orthodox Christianity.
Exactly. It's like almost getting an entirely different version of Christianity with a totally different leadership structure. It shows just how contested and fluid the early church's leadership really was.
But wait, so if there was all this contestation and fragmentation, how did the image of a singular, powerful pope come to be?
That's where the gradual evolution really comes in. It wasn't until the late 3rd and 4th centuries that the Bishop of Rome started asserting special authority. They argued that because Peter died in Rome, his spiritual legacy was uniquely passed on through a concentrated line of succession.
I see.
It's like turning, a political and theological shift into a self-fulfilling prophecy, using history kind of like, a blueprint that supports their modern doctrine.
But, isn't that a bit problematic? I mean, if you manufacture history to suit your needs, doesn't that undermine the credibility of the whole institution?
That's a very fair critique. It does call into question the foundations of doctrines like papal infallibility and absolute apostolic succession. The traditional narrative isn't purely historical. It's interwoven with theology and politics that emerged much later.
Right, that's a solid point.
And another interesting twist is the evolution of the term pope itself. The Bishop of Alexandria kept that title for centuries, and it wasn't until 1073 under Gregory VII that the Roman Church declared pope exclusively for its bishop. That's over 1,000 years after Peter.
That is wild. So the very notion of an exclusive papal title is not something established from the get-go. It evolved over time, almost as if it was a branding exercise?
Exactly, like a rebranding of religious leadership. First, it was an honorific for many, and then, as political and religious needs shifted, it became a unique identifier for the Bishop of Rome.
That's a neat analogy.
And here's something else. Over time, this constructed narrative of papal succession helped solidify Rome's claim to be the center of Christianity. This isn't just about historical record. It underpins doctrines that still, influence millions today.
So basically, entire doctrines and the idea of Rome as the epicenter of Christian authority are built on what might have been, a later construction rather than factual history.
Precisely. The story of Peter handing keys to Linus and so on is more like religious propaganda than an accurate historical account. It essentially sets the stage for the power structure of the modern Catholic Church.
It really does.
Now, here's a thought. If you peel back the layers of traditional storytelling, you realize that what we call the papacy is really an evolved institution, a blend of local leadership, retroactive myth-making, and eventually political consolidation.
And that evolution, it seems almost inevitable given the chaos of those early times. I mean, societies tend to consolidate power when faced with variants of dissent, right?
Right. It's almost like, you could compare it to a startup that, over time, pivots and restructures to create a dominant brand identity. Early Christianity was messy and decentralized, but necessity and, a bit of political maneuvering turned that chaos into a structured hierarchy.
That's a very interesting analogy. But don't you think that reducing centuries of religious evolution to a startup pivot might oversimplify some really deep spiritual and cultural shifts?
That's a valid concern. It certainly is a simplification, but it does capture the essence of shifting power dynamics. There's a lot more nuance to it, especially when you consider how theology, politics, and local traditions intertwined.
Yeah, I get that.
And another layer we need to touch on is why this matters today. The Catholic Church's claim to an unbroken, divinely guided succession supports doctrines like papal infallibility and the centrality of Rome. If that historical foundation crumbles, then the authority of the modern papacy could be seen in a very different light.
Right, so it's not just academic nitpicking. This affects how millions view leadership and legitimacy in the Church.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that history is often layered with myth, and that the narratives we take for granted might be as much about politics and power as they are about pure historical fact.
Very insightful.
And, it challenges the ourselves to think critically about tradition and authority. I mean, if the unbroken papal chain is a later construction, then maybe we need to re-examine what really underpins our understanding of spiritual leadership.
Definitely. It's a conversation that's both historical and deeply current, because it shakes up the concepts of legitimacy and continuity in a way that's thought-provoking for people today.
So, what do you think? Does this retroactive construction of papal authority undermine the legitimacy of the modern papacy, or is it just one aspect of a much more complex evolution? I mean, it's a big question, but worth wrestling with.
I think it certainly puts a spotlight on how power structures form over time. While it might not wholly delegitimize the modern role, it certainly makes us question the narratives we inherit. It's like, looking under the hood of a well-oiled machine and realizing it's been modified along the way.
Right. Exactly. And it's these layers, the mix of historical fact, myth, and political necessity, that make the story so
Yep, absolutely.
controversial and compelling. As we wrap up, it's clear that understanding this evolution gives us a deeper insight not only into early Christianity, but also into how institutions claim authority. And it, invites us to keep asking, what is the core truth behind tradition?
That's a profound thought. And it really highlights why digging into history, even when it challenges long-held beliefs, is so important.
For sure. There's always more to unravel. A little bit of myth here, a dash of politics there, and a whole lot about human nature when it comes to leadership and authority. Thanks for being on this ride and for questioning along the way.
Thanks. It's been an enlightening discussion, and it definitely opens up many avenues for further thought.
Until next time, keep exploring the layers beneath what we think we know.